The numbers don't lie. By early 2026, the WTA Tour was hemorrhaging money in ways that would make even the most optimistic executive lose sleep. The Women's Tennis Association, once positioned as a beacon of gender equality in sports, was staring down a revenue cliff that seemed to have no bottom. Sponsorship deals were evaporating. Television contracts were renegotiated downward. Investors who had once seen women's tennis as the future were quietly pulling their capital elsewhere. The gap between the ATP and WTA wasn't just widening, it was becoming a chasm. For years, the WTA had operated on a narrative of hope. Yes, women's tennis lagged behind the men's tour. Yes, the prize money was lower. Yes, the global broadcast reach wasn't comparable. But there was potential. There was growth. There were stars like Swiatek, Sabalenka, Rybakina, who could carry the torch into a new era of prosperity. What the tour didn't anticipate, what no one could have predicted, was that their greatest threat wouldn't come from external competition. It would come from within their own ranks, from their own failures, from their own blindness. The financial crisis had multiple roots. Tournament organizers were struggling to fill stadiums, media rights negotiations in key markets had stalled. The Asian market, despite being the fastest-growing region for sports consumption, remained largely untapped by the WTA's marketing machine. Sponsors were asking harder questions. Where is the return on investment? Where are the global superstars who can drive merchandise, viewership, and cultural relevance? The answers the WTA provided were increasingly unsatisfying. By 2025, internal reports showed that the tour was operating at a structural deficit. The ATP, by contrast, had consolidated its brand, secured lucrative media deals with streaming giants, and built a star ecosystem that transcended tennis. Meanwhile, the WTA was stuck in perpetual reorganization mode, shifting leadership, restructuring tournaments, and struggling with an identity crisis that no amount of press releases could resolve. The organization knew it needed a moment, a superstar, someone who could shift the narrative entirely. They just didn't recognize her when she arrived. What happens when a sport ignores its savior? March 2025. Miami Open. The draw sheets were released, and for most of the tennis world, it was just another tournament. The usual suspects would compete, the usual favorites would prevail, the usual sponsors would get their activation moments. It was business as usual on the WTA Tour. But in the Philippines, something different was happening. A 20-year-old sensation named Alexandra Ayah had just received a wildcard entry into one of the WTA's most prestigious events. Her ranking was outside the top 100. Her resume was sparse. Her pedigree, while impressive in some tennis circles, wasn't the kind of thing that made mainstream sports analysts sit up and take notice. But the Filipino tennis community knew something the rest of the world didn't. Eala had been quietly building a following for years. She was the nation's tennis hero, a homegrown talent who embodied the hopes of an entire country that had produced few global tennis champions. When she received that Miami wildcard, Filipino sports fans mobilized in ways the WTA hadn't witnessed in decades. They organized watch parties, they purchased tickets, they coordinated social media campaigns. They made it clear, Alexandra Ayah is coming, and we're coming with her. What unfolded over the next 2 weeks was extraordinary. Eala didn't just compete in Miami, she dominated. She defeated higher-ranked opponents with a style that was aggressive, fearless, and captivating. Every match she played drew bigger and bigger crowds. The Filipino diaspora in South Florida showed up in force. The energy in her matches was electric, different from the usual tennis tournament atmosphere. It was the kind of energy that sponsors dream about. It was the kind of energy that moves the needle on viewership, merchandise, and cultural relevance. The media outlets that had ignored her suddenly started paying attention. Sports journalists were writing about the Eala effect, a phenomenon where a single player's participation in a tournament could transform its attendance figures and global reach. She wasn't the most technically skilled player in the draw. She wasn't the highest ranked, but she had something rarer and more valuable. She had gravity. She had a narrative. She had an entire nation watching her every serve, every volley, every moment on court. The WTA's leadership watched this unfold with a mixture of surprise and, if they were being honest with themselves, confusion. How had they missed this? How had they not seen the global potential of a player who could tap into one of the world's largest and most passionate sporting diaspora communities? The Philippines alone has over 120 million people, and millions more spread across North America, the Middle East, Europe, and beyond. That's an audience. That's a market. That's the kind of soft power that turns a tennis tour into a global phenomenon. But recognizing potential and acting on it are two different things, and the WTA was about to demonstrate that it was far better at one than the other. This is where the story takes a turn. Not up, down. She became the first wild card in the history of the Miami Open to defeat 3 Grand Slam champions in straight sets in a single tournament run. The first Filipina woman to reach a WTA 1000 semifinal. The first Filipina to defeat multiple major champions in a single event. Somewhere inside Nike's global scouting division, a document was being updated in real time. She didn't win the tournament. She fell to Jessica Pegula in the semifinals, but losing that match cost her nothing, because what she gained in those preceding rounds was immeasurable: credibility, visibility, and the undivided commercial attention of every major sports brand on the planet. By March 31st, 2025, she entered the WTA's top 100 for the first time. By September, she had won her first WTA 125 title in Guadalajara, another first for any Filipino athlete in the sport's history. By February 2026, she had climbed to a career-high ranking of world number 31. Every single milestone landed like a signature on a contract Nike was already drafting. This is where it gets real. This is where the money enters the room. Don't skip ahead. February 2026, Beaverton, Oregon, the Nike World Headquarters, a campus so storied, so saturated with athletic mythology that simply walking through its gates feels like crossing into a separate dimension of human achievement. The names embedded in those halls belong to history. LeBron James, Serena Williams, Cristiano Ronaldo, athletes who didn't just compete, they redefined what competition meant for their entire generation. And then, Eala walked in. Photographs flooded social media within hours. There she was, inside the legendary tunnel, the corridor where Nike displays portraits of its greatest global ambassadors across every sport imaginable. And positioned among those giants, immaculate in its placement, was her portrait, her face, her story. A sampaguita flower threaded into her identity, a symbol of the Philippines, displayed inside the most powerful athletic institution in the world. "History in full bloom," read the caption beneath one of the displays. She posed with a peace sign, grinning with the energy of someone who understood the magnitude of the moment without being consumed by it. That balance, that rare emotional intelligence, is precisely what Nike recognizes as the rarest commodity in modern sports marketing. Talent is everywhere. Composure in the face of historic moments is extraordinary. Reports surfacing from inside Nike's inner circle confirmed something the public had been speculating about for months. Her existing partnership with Nike, which had been quietly supporting her journey since her teenage years, outfitting her on courts across 4 continents, had been elevated, renewed, expanded. She wasn't simply a sponsored athlete any longer. She had been designated a global ambassador. And with that designation came something that stopped conversations across the Philippine sports community mid-sentence. A deal structure reported to include $1 million in guaranteed ambassador fees, separate from equipment contracts, separate from tournament bonuses, separate from the merchandise and signature collection revenue that sources suggested was already in development. $1 million. For a 20-year-old from Quezon City who had spent her formative years practicing serves on borrowed courts while her nation slept unaware. The numbers weren't just financial, they were philosophical. They said, in the language corporations use when they want to shout without screaming, "We believe in you enough to bet our brand on you." Wait, because the deal itself is only half the story. What Nike is building around her name, that changes everything. Let's be precise. Let's be unflinching, because this chapter deserves honesty more than celebration. Before Ayah, misinformation about Filipino athlete endorsements spread across social media like wildfire consuming dry grass. Fake headlines about $45 million Wilson contracts, fabricated Emirates Airline sponsorships, invented Yonex deals. Filipino fans, desperate, passionate, hungry to see one of their own elevated to the global commercial stage, were repeatedly deceived by fabricated stories that fact-checking organizations like Rappeller and Verifiles had to dismantle piece by piece. Why did that misinformation spread so aggressively? Because the desire was real, because the pride was genuine, because Filipinos had watched their country produce world-class athletes for generations, only to see those athletes perpetually overlooked by the global commercial machine that rewards visibility, not necessarily brilliance. Ayah's verified, confirmed, photographically documented status as a Nike global ambassador, her portrait physically mounted inside Nike's Oregon headquarters, is the answer to every fake headline. It is what the truth looks like when it finally arrives. And the difference between a fabricated $45 million fiction and a real, documented $1 million global ambassadorship is this: one belongs to fantasy, the other belongs to legacy. The financial architecture around Ayah's Nike relationship extends far beyond a single payment. A limited edition Nike collection, the In Full Bloom line, was designed by Filipino artist Georgina Camus, featuring the national sampaguita flower overlaid on Wimbledon's grass courts. The collection sold through Park Access, Nike's official Philippine retailer. Every purchase was a vote. Every sold-out item was a declaration. Sources close to her management team suggest a signature product line, potentially including exclusive footwear, is approaching announcement. If confirmed, she would join the rarest tier of Nike ambassadors, those whose name and likeness become an actual product, not just someone wearing the swoosh, but someone whose identity the swoosh wears. Simultaneously, Milo confirmed her as a brand ambassador in February 2026, co-leading the hashtag #MyMiloStory campaign. Bank of the Philippine Islands continues its long-standing partnership. Globe Telecom, the company that signed her at 8 years old, remains invested. Babolat equips her with the pure arrow racket she weaponizes on hard courts worldwide. The commercial ecosystem surrounding Eala is no longer being assembled. It is fully operational. And it is generating a magnitude of economic and cultural impact that the Philippine sports industry has never previously witnessed from a single tennis player. Here's something the box scores never capture, something the WTA rankings cannot quantify, something the endorsement contracts don't include in their fine print. Eala plays every match carrying the weight of a nation that never had a tennis hero before. Every forehand winner she strikes reverberates not just across a court, but across 40,000 underfunded Philippine tennis courts that dream of producing the next version of her. Every victory press conference she gives in composed, articulate, gracious English is a lesson in representation for every young Filipino child who was told their country doesn't produce that kind of athlete. She has spoken about this responsibility with remarkable maturity for a 20-year-old. When asked about the pressure of being the first in so many categories, first Filipino to win a Grand Slam junior title, first to reach a WTA top 50 ranking, first to defeat multiple top 5 players in a single tournament, she doesn't deflect. She absorbs it. She acknowledges the magnitude without being paralyzed by it. "I just wanted fairness," she said after one particularly scrutinized match result where fans questioned officiation. 3 words: quiet. unambiguous, the kind of statement that travels faster than any press release because it carries the frequency of genuine emotion. That authenticity is what separates Eala from athletes who simply perform sponsorship obligations. She inhabits her partnerships. The Nike Sampaguita hair tie she wore at Wimbledon wasn't a marketing prop. It was a cultural statement, her Filipino identity threaded physically into the most prestigious grass court tournament on earth. Millions watched, billions registered the image. Nike didn't gift her that hair tie because of obligation. They crafted it because they understood what it meant. And that level of brand intelligence, that recognition that Eala's Filipina identity is not a footnote to her tennis, but the entire foundation of her marketability, is precisely why the global ambassadorship carries the weight it does. She is ranked world number 31 as of February 2026. She is 20 years old. She has barely touched the ceiling of what analysts believe she can achieve. Every ranking point she adds, every Grand Slam draw she advances through, every opponent she dismantles on a major stage translates directly into increasing commercial value for a partnership that Nike clearly intends to be generational. The question being debated in sports business circles right now isn't whether Eala deserves this ambassadorship. That debate ended the moment she dismantled Iga Swiatek in Miami. The question is, how high does this go, and how soon? We're almost at the finish line, but the most important question hasn't been asked yet. Entire civilizations measure progress by the monuments they leave behind. Athletes measure theirs by the doors they leave open for those who follow. Eala is 20 years old. She has already wedged open a door that an entire nation had been pressing against for generations. A Nike global ambassadorship at her age, at her ranking, in her sport, from her country. This isn't a milestone. This is a geological shift in the landscape of Asian tennis and global sports marketing simultaneously. Think about what a young girl in Cebu sees when she scrolls through her phone today. She sees Eala's portrait mounted inside Nike's Oregon headquarters. She sees a Sampaguita flower, the national flower of the Philippines, displayed alongside the greatest athletes in human sporting history. She sees a 20-year-old who looks like her, speaks like her, carries the same passport she carries, standing at the center of the world's most powerful sports brand and being told, "You belong here." That image is worth infinitely more than $1 million. That image is worth every junior tennis program that will receive funding because brands now believe the Philippine market is commercially significant. That image is worth every WTA tournament organizer who will now factor Filipino attendance and viewership into their scheduling decisions. That image is worth every coaching academy that will see a new wave of Filipino applicants arriving with fire in their eyes and Eala's trajectory printed in their minds. The commercial story is extraordinary. The human story is seismic. And yet, here's the edge of this narrative that deserves to sit with you. Nike has made her a global ambassador. The Philippines has embraced her as a national treasure. The WTA has watched her dismantle champions. But the work, the relentless pre-dawn, post-exhaustion, season-extending grind of actually climbing from world number 31 to something approaching the very summit of women's tennis, that work hasn't stopped. It intensifies. The greatest risk for any young athlete elevated too rapidly by commercial momentum is losing focus on the court that made the commercial story possible in the first place. Eala's inner circle understands this. Her coaches from the Rafa Nadal Academy understand this. The girl herself, composed, intelligent, fiercely competitive, understands this better than anyone. She walked into Nike's Oregon headquarters, stood beneath her own portrait, pressed both hands to her face in disbelief, and let the tears fall. The same expression captured in the photograph that now hangs in that legendary tunnel, the same tears she shed at the Miami Open when she realized what she had just accomplished. Not the tears of someone overwhelmed by success, the tears of someone who fought so hard, so long, so quietly, that when the moment finally arrived, when the door finally swung open, the body simply couldn't contain what the soul had been carrying. That is Eala. That is why Nike paid $1 million. That is why a nation of over 130 million people stops everything when her name appears on a scoreboard. And that leads us to the question the story demands you sit with. In 10 years, when Eala has collected Grand Slam titles, when her signature Nike shoe sells out across 3 continents, when young Filipino girls are holding rackets because of her, will we look back at this $1 million deal and call it the beginning, or the moment the entire world finally caught up to what one small girl from Quezon City always knew about herself? Drop your answer in the comments. We genuinely want to know. Eala didn't just sign a deal. She signed a declaration that greatness has no passport requirement, that excellence carries no geographic boundary, and that a young woman with a racket, a flower in her hair, and a nation behind her can walk into the most powerful sporting institution in the world and command her rightful place among legends. The Nike offer wasn't an opportunity. It was recognition, arriving exactly on schedule. If this story moved you, if you believe Eala's journey deserves every pair of eyes it can get, subscribe right now. Hit that notification bell, because the chapters ahead of her are going to be worth every second of watching.